The thing that I love about the Wise Guys teams is that you guys have a knack for finding the most passionate founders. They know what they're doing, they believe in what they're doing, and nothing is going to stop them.
It is really intense, I have to say, but I really enjoy it because I feel every day I'm totally evolving in this program, and I see that I have so many weapons already.
It's challenging at times. We come with a strong background of doing a lot of things at once, but it's just amazing to be next to the teams, showing all the creativity you can to help them. So it's not something you have to deliver. It's very creative work, and that's what I'm very surprised that they really like it.
I think the best of the people part always. You already know everything, but here the borders are infinite. Just so much things to learn.
One of them is the passion, and the other one is how much we care about each other. Among everything, we are a team that really likes to spend time with each other, and part of that is because we all share the mission.
Because I always had the feeling that this is the family that I have.
This is not a job, this is what we love to do. I think when you can mix that one, it's great. We just have to sometimes understand that hey, there is more people around us, that we have to put some time for them.
For us, it was mainly like a crash course startup MBA, basically, kind of. It's kind of like a bottle of good wine, kind of that keeps getting better all the time.
I mean, Wise Guys team is what keeps me energized through everyday life. When I started working with the startup scene, Wise Guys was my kind of entryway, so I feel like it's a family. I'm like an adopted startup Wise girl.
I just remember one scene from the Tech Chill 2 months ago when you had the demo day with Swedbank. Nearly all the startups were nearly crying when they said goodbye to the mentors. They can really feel the energy, and I think culture beats everything. And I also see Wise Guys as an execution machine.
Yeah, and people ask why do you do that? There is no money, and very many accelerators have failed after a year or two. I believe that if you really want to do it, if it's your vision, and then you just can't give up, and you will figure it out how it works.
And you have to pitch at the big stage, right?
Yes. My hands are already shaking.
It's too easy for us because this whole month startup Wise Guys, every day we preaching. It's easy for us.
Now we are only going up, and only the sky is the limit.
This is love for what we do at the end of the day, and this is our life that we want to have.
I already know that when it's over, then I'm gonna cry.
3 minutes of station, now back to work.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I see the comments already flowing. Let's keep it up. Say hi, tell us where you're from, and be ready to ask your questions. Today is very exciting because I get to speak with an amazing human. Bob, thank you so much for joining. How are you this morning?
It is my pleasure, and I apologize. I just had to do a reboot, everybody. We did a big camera test. And that's why I'm a little frazzled. But I'm great, and I'm so happy to be here. And thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited.
We're excited. Thank you. Guys, I know this is not the usual time for us to do the stream, but there is a reason behind it. Bob is in Australia, so this was the time that we decided to test. So don't... just go take your cup of coffee. I have mine with me, and let's spend this morning with a great conversation. I would like to remind you that Startup Wise Guys has an accelerator that is investing in early stage startups in XR field, and we just prolonged our applications until January 26th. So if you're still considering whether you should or not give it a try, I'm telling you, you should. This is your sign if you've been waiting for it. We're still gathering all the applications, working on doing the interviews, doing the pitch days, and doing the selection process. The batch itself will start the end of February. So make sure you're there on time. This is our final live stream for this scouting season, and I could not think of a better person for me to speak to. Bob, if I could ask you to give us a little bit of your background, what have you done so far? How are you connected to the XR field?
Yeah, thanks. I've been in, believe it or not, I'm kind of considered a bit of a VR OG. I started working with VR in the mid 90s, which was the last century. I love saying that. It makes me feel so old. And so I started one of the first, I've been in the bleeding edge of technology and location-based entertainment since probably 1989. I started one of the very first laser tag companies. And along that journey, I got hooked up with a company that had the very first VR arcade product called Virtuality, and it was out of the UK. And we built VR and laser tag centers in America in malls in the mid 90s. And so, I was kind of an early adopter in VR arcade business before it was really a business, and it was really bleeding edge, and it was a bit too early. And then went on, did a couple of other things in tech in location-based entertainment, and then hooked up with a company called Global VR and was one of the co-founders of that. And we had the first really successful VR arcade game, and that was in 1999. And we wound up putting that in thousands of locations around the world, and then did a couple of other things. And then on this latest wave of VR with the Oculus, I started, tracking it again. And I wasn't a real believer in VR, to be honest with you. I was really dubious when it came around in 2015, and went to a trade show in Orlando called IAAPA, International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions, and went there with the purpose of writing an article for one of the trade magazines saying, don't buy the VR hype. And I went there and I did a demo from a little company in Australia called Zero Latency. And they had this first free roam warehouse scale, what they called VR system. And I just did it, and it blew me away. And I was like, oh shit. And, flew to Australia, met with them a couple of times, wound up doing some work with them, and then, helped a lot of the early stage virtual reality companies come to market in the LBE space. And that's what I've been doing really ever since.
Looks like you have bought into the hype, huh?
Yeah, I think so. Well, yeah, I'm not sure I've bought into all the hype, though. I am considered a bit of a skeptic in a lot of ways, and we'll probably talk about some of that stuff today.
Oh, yes. That's great. Good. Dear audience, reminding you, you can post your questions. We will see them and we will bring them up a little bit after the start. Bob, what are the things that you're working on right now? What's exciting on your plate?
Yeah. So I'm doing some work with HTC, kind of promoting the new Vive Focus 3, which I'm a huge fan of for location-based entertainment. I think those guys have done an amazing job of building a set of software services into an SDK that allows operators and solution providers to build really cool VR stuff. And I think I think this will be the year that virtual reality starts to encroach on laser tag business, which is where I got my start. And I think some of that's to do with HTC and Stryker and some of the amazing companies in the space. And been working with kind of that intersection of virtual reality and esports and location-based entertainment. There's a lot of hype around esports and LBE, and there's a lot of hype around VR and LBE. And I think that intersection of those two areas is going to prove some really interesting market opportunities for operators in the next coming year. So that's an area I've been really diving deep into. And then just tracking all the metaverse space stuff. I think it's fascinating. Mm-hmm. One of the things people used to say is that VR needed its killer app. And I think, then, the metaverse is the killer app for virtual reality. And I know a lot of people are going to find that controversial, and they're like, oh, you don't need VR. It could be 2D. It could be flat screen. But I think that, once you've done VR and you've done those experiences, you're not going to want to do them on a cell phone. Like, I think the whole metaverse accessible through a cell phone is just crazy bullshit. So I think I'm really fascinated by how that development is tracking, and it's going to take time, and there's a lot of impatience, and there's a lot of going through the hype cycle and stuff. But I find that interesting.
Same. I see Metaverse is a concept, and VR is going to be one of the main tools for us to actually engage and experience it. Cool. I also wanted to ask you about the book you wrote. Could you tell me a little bit about, let's say, the reasoning? How did you come to it? It's called Real Money, right? So how is it going? Are you selling? And overall, your impressions?
Look, I think the book's called Real Money from Virtual Reality. And my intention was just to write a book. That's not the book I wanted to write. The book I wanted to write was called Being Virtual, and I will write that book. And it was kind of going to be a reimagining of Nicholas Negroponte's early 90s book or mid 90s book called Being Digital. And he wrote, Nicholas Negroponte, for those of you that don't know, he founded the MIT Media Lab, Wired Magazine. Like, he was a real early digital guy, and he wrote this amazing book, and he coined the phrase from bits to atoms, how as a society we're going to move from physical to digital. And it was just this paradigm shift that he described in a really simple book. And I wanted to write my version of that for moving from 2D to 3D, moving from, the web to the metaverse. And I started writing, and what came out was a book on go-to-market strategy for startups in the VR space, specifically the LBE space, because that's the space I was working in. But I think the tools and tactics in that book and strategies apply to almost any startup. And I was doing a lot of workshops for companies, helping them with their go-to-market strategy. And so just that's what came out of my fingers on the keyboard. And I was really resistant to it. For those of you that have tried to write a book, I was really resistant to writing the book that came out. And finally, when I let go, I did. And I think it's helped a lot of companies. Like, I wasn't intending to make money off of it. It was really just to try to help people understand what's happening. And I think it's been really helpful based on the comments I've gotten, the feedback I've gotten, to startups around the world in the VR space.
I'm curious if anyone from our audience have already read it. Please drop a comment. I think that I'm ready to move into, let's say, the first section of today's conversation. And I would like to start it from, I know it's a very generic question, but I also know you have the answers. What do you see in XR field today? As in, what are the trends and why are you skeptical about the field, even though there has been so many things you've done personally in the field?
Good question. I think that what I see is a lot of confusion. I see a lot of different products and solutions trying to glom onto the metaverse moniker. So Web3, blockchain, NFTs, we see all of these like really hyped buzzwords, and each one on their own is a valid technology market opportunity somewhere, right? But I think that when Meta changed their name and Metaverse became the buzz term and everybody started getting all the hype, everybody tried to glom onto that, and it created a lot of confusion around what is the metaverse. And all of a sudden XR, which was the driving force of metaverse, all of a sudden kind of took a back seat to all of these other technologies and words and buzzwords and people trying to glom onto it. And it just created a massive confusion. And I never want to see anyone suffer. I never want to see any pain on anything. But I think the pullback of coins and blockchain and NFTs and that kind of bubble bursting hopefully create some clear space for the XR community to go back to owning Metaverse. Because I actually think that, like I said, Metaverse is the killer app for VR and AR. And so anyway, I think that's the biggest trend that I'm following right now is the mass confusion around what is the Metaverse. And I think that we need to start kind of, and eventually it'll settle down into a thing and as people experience more of it. But I think that's the thing that and that's where some of my skepticism comes in around everybody just trying to own this term and make it their own and pulling it into different areas that I don't know that makes sense. I don't know that the metaverse needs to be built on blockchain. Sorry, doesn't. And so that's kind of one of the big things that tracking and I'm opinionated about.
Yeah, I can agree. When we were starting the first cohort, so early last year, we were sitting with Andrei discussing what should be, let's say, the buzzwords, the keywords that we need to use towards the startups we're looking for. And we were kind of mindful whether we put Metaverse there or not, because of how many things it could potentially consider as applicable startups, right? But I think the confusion is because it's way too general and nobody actually understands what does it mean. It's so, I don't know, it's just out there. It's anything that you can think of that could be somehow 3D or intersectional in between people from different networks. Yeah, it's interesting to see how it's going right now. I'm hoping that we're shaping it, and probably there will be some new terms and new definitions emerging from this.
I've heard a lot of people say that, we don't use information superhighway anymore, but to describe the web or the internet. But I'm not sure that anybody ever used that term other than, it was kind of a dumb term to start with, right? And it was really the media that used it to try to, and Al Gore and whoever came up with that, trying to describe it. But I actually think the metaverse is a great term, and I'm not sure we're going to change it. I think that and I struggled, I would say a year and a half ago, or maybe even a year ago, I really struggled to I would throw up a little in my mouth when I would say it. And so I had to get over the use of it. And I think that Meta changing their name to Metaverse, or Facebook changing their name to Meta, actually is going to, when people look back on it, they're going to see that was a turning point for the XR industry. And as much as we want to complain, and I'll hang Mark Zuckerberg out to dry all day long for their egregious behavior, nobody's doing more to drive awareness and adoption of XR than he is. And so at some point, I think that there's a paradox there where I've started defending him in the last several months, which is a little bit crazy.
That's a turn. My next question will be about geography. So with all your travels, you're right now spending some time in Australia. I'm somehow assuming that probably you also spent quite a lot of time in the US, also working in the industry. And I know that that's how we've met, that you've been also touring Europe, at least last year. What do you see in European XR? Do you see any, peculiarities, differences?
Look, I think, and Mariia, you were there at Laval Virtual last year when we did the Visionaries workshop. And I think the thing that I'm seeing out of the EU, which I'm really excited about, which is weird to hear an American say this, is the government taking a aggressive approach around legislation and rules for privacy. I think that one of the big risks that we face as humans is being manipulated by these platforms, and there is no more powerful technology than we've ever seen to be able to manipulate people's cognitive states and therefore their behavior than VR. And I have real dire concerns around, when we see how the online platforms have manipulated, vulnerable teenagers, for example, to try to sell that information to advertisers so they're more likely to buy products when they're feeling bad about themselves. That has to be that behavior needs to be criminalized. And I think the EU is taking the first step towards that. And if we don't get our hands around it now, then the genie is going to get out of the bottle, and so I applaud the EU for their stance on that. And they've opened an office in San Francisco to help U.S. tech companies get their heads and arms around the legislation that's going to come, because the U.S. legislators, they're never going to do it. There's just too much debate, too much conflict, too much fractions, and I don't think they understand it. I just don't think they get it. And so, for me, for Europe, I applaud the EU government, and I'm a free market guy. I can't believe I'm actually hearing myself say that, but I applaud them for taking that stance.
You mentioned that last year we had a chance to work a little bit together on a mastermind group, and this was back in was it April?
April.
I think,
Yeah.
in Laval. So Laval Virtual has invited us for the think tank around what's the future of XR. And I think for me, it was really interesting to see that out of all the things we could have talked about, right? So I don't know, hardware advancement, software developments, UX, or I don't know, 3D, whatever we were putting there as some sort of an issue that we think should be tackled, we all unanimously just ended up talking about the ethics of XR and generally what is the impact that we bring to the society, to how we're socially interacting with each other. What do you see is still, how do I frame this? So what do you think are the biggest issues that we need to tackle, maybe even in 2023, in order for us to build up the fundament to, not let the genie out, just like you said?
Yeah, no, and somebody just posted a comment about, voice cloning technology and, what's happened with AI and, and ChatGPT and Midjourney and there was just a class action suit filed this week against the AI companies on behalf of artists having their works as being the derivatives for profit eventually, and without any credit or remuneration. And I think that I think this intersection of AI and it's happening so quickly. And so I watched somebody posted a video yesterday on YouTube, how in 1 hour they created a scene in Unity where you would drive a character in an environment. There would be a bot, an NPC character there, and the NPC character was basically driven by ChatGPT. He did this in an hour. He did a 1 hour tutorial on YouTube and show how he coded. And at the end, he was able to interact with a GPT-3 powered bot in Unity. And so if you think about the ability for advertisers, let's say, to use AI tools with certain agendas, right? So pretend you're, someone who, just bought a new Tesla automobile, not to pick on Tesla or Elon Musk, but, and anytime somebody goes by you, figure out a way to engage them in a conversation that surreptitiously sells Tesla cars. Like, that reality is right in front of us. They're going to be able to do that in the next 12 to 18 months. And so people have no idea the level of manipulation that's going to be done by advertisers. And because a lot of these platforms and content are so ad driven, because we don't want to pay for content and access as consumers, we're setting ourselves up as a society to be manipulated by advertising. Look, and I'm a marketing guy. Like, I got my background's in marketing. I understand manipulating cognitive state, but doing it through print ads and photography and words is one thing. Doing it through XR video, just it terrifies me. And so that's the thing that I don't think anybody. And there's a guy named Louis. I just want to give a plug to a guy named Louis Rosenberg. You can find him on LinkedIn. He's writing some of the best content on this very issue on LinkedIn, and I highly recommend you guys check him out.
Thank you so much. I would like to highlight the first question, and please, audience, keep it coming. So Andrei is asking, could you reflect on the potential of B2B versus B2C use cases? Meta reported 2% decline in sales of Quest in 2022. Do you see any uptake in consumer adoption of the XR tech?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So once again, and thanks, Andre. Good to see you on here. So at Christmas, once again, the Meta app was the #1 free download on iTunes. So there's definitely people are still buying VR. People are asking for VR. This is a bit anecdotal. I don't know that Meta actually reports individual sales. That might be from a third-party research report. I haven't seen an actual report from Meta, and I'd love to see it, Andre, if you can shoot that to me if you've got it. But I think that, again, anytime you have a market with one supplier, it's not going to make a market. And I think Quest is the supplier, and people aren't using it. I know a lot of people that have it. We know the statistics around how often it gets used and its stickiness actually are probably the biggest problem, more than the sales. And, I was really excited when they, the Quest Pro shipped, and it's way more comfortable than the Quest. I can't wear the Quest for more than 20 minutes without it hurting. I can go an hour with this max. It's still not there. I'm really excited about the new Vive, the XR Elite from HTC. It's like super light and I haven't tried it yet myself. I'll hopefully get a demo of it next week. Reports are it's super comfortable, but you know who's going to make the market, right? Apple. And Apple knows how to make markets. And I think that once they enter the market, you're going to have two really viable consumer companies. And Apple's a hardware consumer products company. Like Facebook is not they're not a consumer products company. They're a software platform. And they've done a better job. I don't know if you guys saw the most recent Connect, the launch video for the Meta Quest Pro looked like it was done by Apple, right? So they're learning and they're getting better, but I still don't think they've figured out how to market the product. And I think Apple will make the market, and that's going to be what drives consumer adoption, even at a $3,000 price point. I think initially, I think that's fine. The first iPhone was ridiculously pricey. It was 15 years ago. It was like $800 or $900, right? It wasn't subsidized. And so I still think that it'll be expensive. People will still buy it, especially, VR fans or Apple fans that want VR. And I think that that's going to make the market. And then the prices will come down. There was a rumor today that Apple's put off their AR headset to work on a lower priced VR headset or mixed reality. And I think it's worth touching on this, the term mixed reality, right? We were kind of always AR, VR, MR, or VR, AR, MR. And I think the release of the Quest Pro really anchored that this combination of VR and AR into MR is the solution. And I think that we're going to drop that whole thing. And I think MR is going to be the term that we wind up adopting for the technology. And I think Apple's going to do an amazing job of it. And hopefully it'll be comfortable. And hopefully we see it this year.
We're all waiting for some years now.
Yeah, I know. I said my original prediction was 2024. When they first were rumored to do it, my prediction was 2024, and I think I'm going to be pretty damn close.
Yeah, there's still time. They still got time to actually make it happen. But I agree on your point about MR. I think that's it just gets there. So before this, I think the biggest restriction was that it's just a lot of hardware to put all together, and we didn't necessarily know how to make it as effective as it can be. But now we're getting there. So,
and the thing that Apple does better than anybody is they understand user interface. Like the smartphones that you're all used to right now. Before iPhone, I was using a Samsung Blackjack 2 on Windows Phone, and it was shit. And it was the most painful browsing experience I've ever had. And then Apple created pinch and zoom. They created multi-touch on a phone. And then all of a sudden, Android copied it. And now you had two competitors doing the same thing. And so Apple's going to show you how to use VR or MR. And then Facebook will copy them like Google and Android did. And you'll have two viable companies competing in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully I hope HTC figures out how to become the third player. They're not going to compete with Apple, but hopefully they can compete for that number 2 position.
Mm-hmm. One more question. It was partially in Andre's question as well, because it's interesting for us since we're working with the B2B startups. That's the special sauce that we have. I was wondering, were there any cases or let's say any startups that you've seen over the last year, so 2022, that maybe impressed you or made you think that, okay, this is moving somewhere. I actually didn't see this as a trend, but now it makes sense?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
All predictable.
Look, I kind of have to say not really. Like I'm seeing, I'm seeing progression and iteration on things, but I don't know that I've seen. I can't think of anything right now off the top of my head that surprised me and blew me away. I'm constantly, to be honest with you, disappointed in the lack of revolutionary innovation that we're seeing in the space. Where I'm seeing a lot of copycatting. I'm seeing a lot of Me Tooing. I'm seeing a lot of, 50 different companies all doing the same stuff. And as a B2B side, and by the way, I've done 9 startups now, right, as an entrepreneur, and most of them in tech and most of them B2B. And so that's kind of my jam. And what I don't see is enough solutions to big, painful problems. And I don't see enough, I don't see enough, just innovation. But what I am starting to see, so in the companies that did co-location collaborative work groups in VR, the ones that seem to be successful, the ones that really found niches, right? And so here's one for architecture, here's one for education, right? And so finding there's a saying, the niches are in the riches, the niches are in the riches, or the niches are in the riches. I don't know how to say it, but I think that's something that the companies that I am seeing successful are going really narrow on their market niche and trying to dominate a niche. And that's something that I write about in my book as well.
Thanks. I would like to highlight another comment. This one is coming from Andy Ray. So as you know, we have a solution designed for LBE vendors creating full body immersive experiences. How do you see this space going, given the rise of the home metaverse? And do you think the consumers will understand the difference, or indeed want to experience the difference in home versus out of home?
Yeah, it's a really big question. Thank you, Andy. And I'm actually concerned about it, to be honest with you. And some of the companies that I talk to in the LBE space, my question is, when I can do in-home virtual telepresence, and I think this goes beyond VR. This goes to location-based entertainment. Like, if I can be with my friends in a way that feels real in virtual reality, with decent avatars or maybe even photorealistic avatars, like the work that Meta Labs is doing in photorealistic avatars is shockingly good, right? And so within 3 to 5 years, we'll have photorealistic avatars that I can take with my iPhone with a LiDAR scanner and show up in a virtual space with my friends without, from the comfort of my living room without putting on pants. Why do I need to go to an arcade? Why do I need to go to a family entertainment center? I'm not sure. There's this concept of shared experience that movie theaters banked on for a long time. And they said, people will always want to go to movie theaters because they love the shared experience. And that was just bullshit. What people wanted was to see the movie they wanted to see. And the minute it was available on their 80-inch HD TV at home on a streaming network, they stopped going to movie theaters. And yeah, there was fear of the pandemic and everything, but streaming blew up the window, the exclusive window for movie distribution. And so I think that there's a lot of location-based entertainment operators who believe that this notion of a shared experience or notion of people wanting to go out to socialize with each other is actually really, really a dangerous assumption. And I think that so I don't know if it's not on consumers to understand the difference. It's up to the operator or the solution provider to tell the difference of what it is. And if you can't do that really effectively, they're not going to show up. And so I actually have real concerns about the future of LBVR if the consumer VR market actually catches fire and virtual telepresence becomes a thing.
Thank you. Amazing. I would like to bring up a question from my colleague. Karina, our head of scouting, she says that we see quite a lot of medical tech and health tech startups applying to our XR program, and the ideas are very interesting and sound applicable. What are your thoughts on VR, AR usage in those industries? And is it just experimental phase, or is it already there?
Well, it's definitely experimental. I think everything in VR is experimental, right? I mean, there is no widely adopted use case anywhere yet. And so it's definitely experimental, but the results of those experiments have been fantastic. And just this month, the Federal Drug Administration in the US approved HoloLens for being used as a medical device in an not HoloLens, Magic Leap 2, as a medical device in the operating theater. And so, if there's ever a proof point that XR can be, used as medical tech, it's, that shouldn't be up for debate anymore. And, the ability to project in the line of sight of a surgeon all the information that they need in real time to stay focused for, neurosurgery, arthroscopy, like all of that stuff, it's going to be game changing. And I'd be shocked if in 10 years, every single surgeon didn't have an AR device. I'd be like, I would eat a bug on your show. You can bring me back. And so I think it's absolutely, it's a game changer. And Dr. Siegel from the Cedars-Sinai Institute in LA is running his second MedTech conference for VR in March this year. And he was the guy that really was pushing VR for pain treatment and getting some great results on using VR with patients in the hospital to distract them from their pain, because in some cases it was just as effective as opiates. And so I think there's some great proof that that's going to happen. I'd be shocked if it didn't.
Thank you so much. And
I also want to add that as a startup, medical is one of the hardest go-to-markets. Like, there's anywhere where you're going to have regulatory environment that you have to manage through, your go-to-market is going to be that much more challenging. And so just beware that as a pure med tech startup, you got to have a lot of money, generally.
And the right people to open the doors.
You always need the right people, but in that case, you need a lot of money too. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you everyone for all the many questions. I will take 2 more and then we will be closing the streaming. So I would like to go with Tim. Yes. Could you name 3 R&D areas that are or will be very important for XR tech advancement in the next years, and maybe besides the merger with AI technology?
Yeah, it's another great question. I think the waveguide optics, I think any optics that make headsets lighter and closer to glasses wearables will drive adoption, and ultimately, mass adoption. If you're going to do this out of home, we've got to figure out the optics to allow this to give a better field of view and brightness in an outside setting. And I think that's an area of pure R&D that is going to be critical to the adoption of XR over the next couple of years. And I would say avatar. I think photorealistic avatars, as much as we want to, it's kind of fun and goofy to be, a television set or cat or whatever in a VR environment. I think to get widespread adoption in the business community, I think we've got to have photorealistic avatars. And so I think that's going to be a game changer for XR. And you said 3. I think the other thing, and this isn't necessarily R&D, but it's really about standards and interoperability, is if we want a metaverse, how are these systems going to connect? Horizons just, enabled the ability for people to put a portal from one experience to another within Horizons. But, we know that the metaverse isn't going to be one world run by one company. And so how do we set it up to where it's easy? With the web wouldn't have happened if you couldn't click on one thing and go to the next website. And so we have to figure out what standards we can adopt to be able to create that interoperability around between online worlds, because there's no metaverse if we can't connect all the online worlds. If I have to quit Fortnite and load Roblox and then quit Roblox and load Horizon, or whatever. Like, it's just not a metaverse. It's just a bunch of freaking apps. And I think that would be a waste if that's how we went.
Absolutely true. And now, last question would be about the EdTech. So I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong. Nyuani? I don't know. So how do you see the formal education space from elementary school evolve with these emerging technologies?
Yeah, really good question. I try to defer to my friend Steve Grubbs on the education stuff from Victory XR. If you're not familiar with him, you should definitely check him out. He's building with major universities in the U.S. these metaversities, as you coined the term, and doing amazing work. And he's been working in that space for I don't know, several years now. Actually, he'd be a great guest for this show, Mariia, in the future. But look, I think, again, it's like medical. It is the data on learning in VR through the roof. Retention, willingness to experiment, focus. All, Alvin Wayne Grayland has great stats from HTC that he talks about all of the research coming from the education world, especially lower ed. And so we know it's effective. We know that it helps kids learn better. It helps them focus better. It helps them retain better. And then I see kids lugging 60-pound backpacks, with textbooks this thick home from work in a day and age when I can have everything on a tablet. And I see how slow it is for education to adopt new technology. Now, some of that is budgetary, but some of it is just the textbook companies don't want to allow it to happen. The teachers that write the textbooks for the classes get paid by the school system. So there's a lot of political and economic disincentive for the education system to adopt new technology. And so I think it's going to be, unfortunately for our children, it's going to be slow. But the data that supports it, it should be adopted as soon as the tech is feasible. Look, the tech still isn't seamless and friction-free enough, right? It still takes too long. Downloading updates, getting it in, the battery life isn't good enough. I mean, I think we're still 3 to 5 years away from affordable tech that is friction-free. But my fear is it'll take 15 years for the education systems to adopt it.
Thank you. The chat is booming. There are many, many questions. I can see a couple that have the same line about AI. And I personally wanted to also ask, what do you think about the role of generative AI that is going to take in the XR and maybe creating the future experiences?
Yeah, look, I think just yesterday I was watching a video of a guy that created, and you've probably seen it. It started on TikTok. It's already circulating on LinkedIn, where he took created a mid-journey avatar, put it into another platform, voice animated it, did voice to text, created the whole thing in all the text in Chat GPT, created music. He said he did the whole thing in 10 minutes. I'll call bullshit on that. Maybe it took him an hour. But and then created a 3D animated avatar telling a story in an hour, all with 5 different AI platforms. So, the creative, look, it's really hard building these environments, and within 5 years, the no code AI driven world building feels like a reality. And if it's not 5 years, certainly within 10 years. So, we look at the creator economy and what, having a good camera on a cell phone created Instagram and the whole culture of selfies leading to influencers kind of came from having cameras on cell phones. And so now we've got LiDAR cameras on cell phones, and we have generative AI that can create immersive worlds without coding. And so it's not very far in the future where, anybody will be able to create a 3D environment, and the best ones will be created by artists, but that doesn't mean everybody won't be able to create one. And I think that's how the metaverse gets built. Ultimately, the metaverse is built through, generative AI being used by people like me who haven't coded since BASIC in the 1980s, or people younger than me that have better ideas probably, but. Yeah.
Thank you.
And the thing, I just want to add one more thing, Mariia. The thing that gets me about AI, and again scares me a little bit, is the people that have been working in AI for years or decades all are surprised by how fast it got so good in the last 18 months. And so you've got people who've been working in AI for 20 years, 30 years that are going, oh shit. And so we have, those of us that are not working in AI have no idea how fast or how good it's going to get. And so that scares me a little bit. I don't think we know what we're in for.
From here on, it's a geometric progression, right? It just will multiply its own capacities. So
and we struggle. And when it starts learning, like right now, ChatGPT-3 doesn't access the internet. You know, at some point they're going to let it have access to the internet, and it's going to learn itself. And when it does that, you know, are we doomed? Like I'm on the fence. Like I'm old enough to not actually give a shit, but I worry about my kids and everybody else out there that's younger than me. I do have dire concerns about AI and its impact. I think it's going to be good for XR. I'm not sure it's going to be good for society.
I think on one of the openings of the Web Summit, maybe in 2017, Stephen Hawking was one of the opening, characters there. He recorded the video for all the AI developers, and his main message was, guys, we have to be very, very cautious, and not only careful, but more like conscious about what are the choices that we make and how do we get from here on, because we're the ones building the future, and it has to be responsible.
Yeah.
With this, I would like to ask you for some final words for the founders out here trying to build their XR businesses, trying to get them places.
Yeah. Look, I think find a problem to solve and solve that's there today. Like if you're doing a startup now with an eye to 5 years in the future, you might not be around 5 years in the future, especially in this economic environment we find ourselves in right now. And so find a problem that exists today and solve it. And if that problem doesn't exist in XR, but it exists somewhere else, and you think that problem is going to manifest as XR grows and the metaverse grows, it's okay to start in 2D. I think HTC has done a great job of, they realized they were over investing too early in XR exclusive software solutions. So they said, let's open them up to mobile and 2D screens to get people engaged. And so while I don't believe the metaverse is going to be a 2D world, I do believe it's okay to make money in the 2D world while you're figuring out and letting the metaverse develop. And that would be my heartfelt best advice I could give anybody doing a pure startup right now is you got to get to revenue. And there's not a lot of revenue in the metaverse unless you're, Roblox or Unreal or Unity or one of the core tools that people are using to build it.
Thank you so much, Bob. This has been an amazing conversation. I would like to remind our audience the applications are open until January 26th. We are the ones helping you find that revenue, helping you find your way to the market and how to solidify your position and make a greater impact. Bob, thank you so much. It's been amazing.
My pleasure, Mariia. And I would like, if you send me the comments, I'd be more than willing to go onto LinkedIn and maybe make some additional follow-up videos and tag the people that ask the questions to kind of continue to answer questions, because the questions are fascinating and we could spend hours answering them and they're worth answering. So I'll offer to do that and keep the conversation going.
Great. Then we will be waiting for your answers in the chat. I'll send you the link.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you have an amazing day.
Happy New Year. All right. Thanks, Mariia.